Hi, my name is Matt Levine, and for my reading aloud story, I've chosen The Three Snake Leaves. Once there was a poor man who couldn't support his only son anymore. When the son realized this, he said, "Father, it's no use my staying here. I'm just a burden to you. I'm going to leave home and see if I can earn a living." The father gave him his blessing, and they parted sorrowfully. The king of a nearby country was a powerful ruler, and at that time he was waging war. The young man enlisted in his army and soon found himself at the front where a great battle was being fought. The bullets flew like hail, the danger was hideous, and his comrades were falling dead all around. When the general himself fell dead, the last of the troops were going to flee, but the young man took his place and yelled, "We won't be defeated! Follow me, and God save the king!" The men followed him as he led the charge, and they soon had the enemy on the run. When the king heard of the young man's part in the victory, he promoted him to field marshal, gave him gold and treasure, and bestowed on him the highest honors in the kingdom. Now the king had a daughter who was very beautiful, but she had one strange obsession. She had sworn an oath not to marry any man unless he promised to let himself be buried alive with her if she died first. "After all, if he really loves me," she said, "why would he want to go on living?" And she said that she would do the same and be buried with him if he was the first to die. This grim condition had put off many young men who would otherwise have begged to marry her, but the soldier was so struck by her beauty that nothing would discourage him. So he asked the king for her hand. "Do you know what you must promise?" said the king. "If she dies before me, I must go to the grave with her," said the soldier. "But I love her so much that I'm willing to risk that." The king consented, and the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. For a while they lived together happily, but one day the princess fell ill. Doctors came from all over the kingdom, but none of them could help her, and presently she died. And then the young soldier remembered the promise he'd had to make, and shuddered. There was no way of getting out of it, even if he'd wanted to break the promise, because the king was going to put sentries at the grave itself and all around the cemetery in case he tried to escape. When the day came for the princess to be buried, they carried her body to the royal vault, made sure the young man was inside, and the king personally locked and bolted the door. They had put some provisions in there. On a table there were 4 candles, 4 loaves of bread, and 4 bottles of wine. The soldier sat there beside the princess's body day after day, taking only a mouthful of bread and a sip of wine, making them last as long as possible. When he'd taken the last sip but one, and eaten the last mouthful but one, and when the last candle was down to its last inch, he knew that his time had nearly come. But as he sat there in despair, he saw a snake crawl out of a corner of the vault and move towards the body. Thinking it intended to eat her, the young man drew his sword. "While I live, you shan't touch her," he said, and struck the snake 3 times, cutting it into pieces. Shortly afterwards, a second snake came crawling out of the corner. It came to the body of the first snake and looked at it, piece by piece, and then crawled away again. Soon it came back, and this time it had 3 green leaves in its mouth. Carefully moving the first snake's body together again, it laid a leaf on each of the wounds, and in a moment the dead snake stirred into life. The wounds closed up, and it was whole again. The 2 snakes hurried away together. But the leaves were still lying where they'd left them, and the young man thought if their miraculous power had brought the snake back to life, it might do the same for a human being. So he picked up the leaves and laid them on the dead princess's white face, one on her mouth and the other 2 on her eyes. And as soon as he did this, her blood began to stir. A healthy pink came into her cheeks, and she drew a breath and opened her eyes. "God in heaven," she said, "where am I?" "You're with me, my dear wife," said the soldier, and told her all that had happened. He gave her the very last mouthful of bread and the very last sip of wine, and then they banged on the door and shouted so loudly that the sentries outside heard them and went running to the king. The king came to the graveyard himself and personally unlocked and unbolted the door of the vault. The princess tumbled into his arms. He shook the young man's hand, and everyone rejoiced at the miracle that had brought her back to life. As for the snake leaves, the soldier was a careful man, and he told no one about the princess he had revived. but he had an honest and reliable servant. So he gave this servant the 3 snake leaves to look after. Take good care of them, he said, and make sure you keep them with you wherever you go. You never know when we might need them again. Now, after she was brought back to life, a change came over the princess. All the love she had had for her husband drained away from her heart. She still pretended to love him, however, and when he suggested making a sea voyage to visit his old father, she agreed at once. What a pleasure it'd be to meet the noble father of my dearest husband, she said. But once at sea, she forgot the great devotion the young man had shown her, because she felt a lust growing in her for the captain of the ship. Nothing would satisfy her but to sleep with him, and soon they were lovers. One night in his arms, she whispered, Oh, if only my husband were dead, what a marriage we two would make. That is easily arranged, said the captain. He took a length of cord, and, with the princess at his side, crept into the cabin where the young man was sleeping. The princess held one end of the cord, and the captain wound the other around her husband's neck, and then they pulled so hard that, struggle as they might, he couldn't fight them off, and soon they had strangled him. The princess took her dead husband by the head, and the captain took him by the feet, and they threw him over the ship's rail. Let's go home now, said the princess. I'll tell my father that he died at sea, and I'll sing your praises, and he'll let us be married, and you can inherit the kingdom. But the faithful servant had seen everything they'd done, and as soon as their backs were turned, he untied a boat from the ship and rowed back in search of his master's body. He soon found it, and after hauling it into the boat, he untied the cord from around the young man's neck and put the 3 snake leaves on his eyes and mouth, and he came back to life at once. Then the two of them rowed with all their might. Day and night they rowed, stopping for nothing, and their boat flew over the waves so fast that they reached the shore a day before the ship and went straight to the palace. The king was amazed to see them. What happened? He said. Where's my daughter? They told him everything, and he was shocked to hear of his daughter's treachery. I can't believe she'd do such a terrible thing, he said, but the truth will soon come to light. And so it did. Very soon the ship arrived at the port, and on hearing of this, the king made the young man and his servant wait in a hidden room, where they could listen to everything that was said. The princess, dressed all in black, came sobbing to her father. Why have you come back alone? He said. Where's your husband, and why are you wearing mourning? Oh, father dear, she said, I'm inconsolable. My husband took ill with the yellow fever and died. The captain and I had to bury him at sea. If he hadn't helped me, I don't know what I would have done. But the captain's such a good man. He looked after my dear husband when the fever was at its height. No matter what the danger, he can tell you all about it. Oh, your husband's dead, is he? Said the king. Let's see if I can bring him back to life. And he opened the door and invited the other two to come out. When the princess saw the young man, she fell to the ground as if she'd been struck by lightning. She tried to say that her husband must have been hallucinating in his fever, that he must have fallen into a coma so deep they mistook it for death. But the servant produced the cord, and in the face of that evidence, she had to admit her guilt. Yes, we did it, she sobbed, but please, father, show some mercy. Don't speak to me of mercy, said the king. Your husband was ready to die in the grave with you, and he gave you back your life, but you killed him in his sleep. You'll get the punishment you deserve. And she and the captain were put on board a ship with holes drilled in the hull and sent out over the stormy sea. Soon they sank with the ship and were never seen again.